Hello and welcome back to the A4Q Testing Summit Jubilee Edition. My apologies for the wait. We were experiencing some technical difficulties, but we are back in action. With me today, we have the chair of ISTQB Agile and the CTG's primary ISTQB and certification trainer since 2008, Michael Pilaeten. Over the last 5 years, he's helped more than 400 testers in improving their skill set. I look forward to an interesting presentation and hand over to you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Yeah, and also from my side, sorry for the technical difficulties and hiccups. So I'll try to make the most of it and try to provide a qualitative presentation. As the introduction, I'm Michael, come from Belgium, work for a company called CTG, work there as learning and development manager, and I have a large history in software testing. And this presentation is about quality and agile. Quality from the aspect of how can an agile team ensure a qualitative delivery of the product they're working on, or from the other side, how can a tester in an agile team produce qualitative work but also achieve qualitative results, which makes everybody happy. That's in a nutshell what I will be talking about. Now, first, let's go back in time, the time of the old white people, including myself. So this old white guy is about to tell you a story about traditional, or so you want, old testing. As any great story starts, or any fairy tale starts, once there was a time when most software development was done in a rather sequential approach. You can call it waterfall, V model, W model, sequential, one step after the other. That approach had and still has many advantages. Some like predictability of results, there were quality gates, there's stability, there's a change request process, there's an entire process around it, governance around it, but also it has quite some disadvantages. First of all, work in a traditional project happened in silos. Developers were working together doing their stuff, their magical stuff. Analysts were working together doing their magical stuff. Testers were working together doing their magical stuff. But in between these groups, in between these silos, there is or there was little or no collaboration, little or no communication. If there was communication, that was done primarily via work products, via defects. Tester found something, put their notes into a defect, communicate the defect to a developer responded via the defect. A tester or an analyst had something to say, a change to be made, analyst made a requirement or a change request was sent to the developer, to the tester, communication via requirements. A developer had something to say what was ready for which release, developer made a release note. So every communication was done basically paper-based. The only collaboration that you truly had between developers and testers was what you call defect ping pong. You have a tester raising an incident or a defect in what we could call now Jira or whatever kind of defect management system you would have, where the developer then would respond, no, this is not a defect. And then the tester would say, yes, it's a defect, and you play defect ping pong, back and forth, back and forth. Active collaboration, communication, nothing. So that's one of the pitfalls. The second pitfall is that testing has or had to wait in a sequential model until the developers are ready to throw it over the edge, until their work is done, and then testing can start. And more than often, the initial quality of that work is rather unclear. Is this final? Is this finalized? Was it unit tested? Was it tested at all? I've encountered too many projects where developers say, yes, you can test, and either even the sanity test or the smoke test initially fails, or the program doesn't even start up, the website is not ready. That happens, and that's also a part of a consequence of working in silos versus working together. The third concept there, which can be a misconception, is the concept of the customer. During a project, a customer can have an epiphany, can have a great business idea that needs urgent resolution. In a sequential model, either you had to tell the customer that, well, that great idea is impossible because, we have spent already some time on analysis and development, we're not testing, so we cannot do that. We first need to finish testing and then we can take a look at your idea. So the result is you end up with an unhappy customer, but also with an undesired product. This is not anymore the product that the customer wants. Option two is that you told them, yes, dear customer, this is possible. Your change, we're going to embrace it. We're going to do that. But because we already did analysis and development and maybe a part of testing, we have a huge impact on budget and in total delivery time. So again, you end up with an unhappy customer and also a late and expensive product. Again, not so positive consequence. A fourth one is that your tester in a sequential model typically works all alone in a form of isolation, where every tester has his or her own specialty, where analysts and developers are already working on another product while you are testing or on another version of the same product you are testing. So every time you even dare to bother them that you have a question regarding an unclear, an unlogical requirement, or whether you encounter a defect or some quirky behavior and you dare to bother a developer, you risk endangering the timely or the qualitative delivery of that other product that you're working on or the other version that you're working on. So also a negative side to the sequential model. And typically you had or you still have piles and piles of documentation of paperwork, which is, let us be clear, a good thing, because if it's one thing that testers are always doing is complaining that they don't have the right form of documentation. But most likely that documentation is outdated because of the sequence of events. It's most likely also incomplete or inconsistent or incorrect. And that means that in the worst sense, it can happen that your test cases, whether they are written down or done exploratory, which are based on a form of documentation, can lead to false positive results. You are going to pass something that should never have passed, which is even worse than not having tested at all. Now, when you are as a tester are doing a good job and you're feeling happy with yourself and you have found and you have identified some defects, the chance is quite likely that all hell will break loose. Because due to the time constraints of such a sequential model, every defect is considered troublesome. And testers more than often are blamed for the delays due to the defects they found. The quotes where project managers come in rushing and asking testers, why the hell did you find all those defects because you are delaying our project, are numerous. And of course, you'll place some kind of defect limbo. You will lower the defect quality bar. What initially was found and assessed as a major or blocking defect might suddenly and magically convert into a medium or even a cosmetic defect. Because, we cannot go live with open, blocking, or major defect. So, lo and behold, all of a sudden, it's a cosmetic defect and we can go live. Unhappy tester, unhappy customer. Now, next to all of that, when you work in a traditional way, in a sequential way, in an old way, if you want to call it like that, we are creating as testers something we call work products. These are the items we create. Those are typically your test cases, your translation from your requirements to something which is able to test, whether you call it a test condition, a test case, a test coverage item, a test suite, a test procedure, couldn't care less, something that presents what you will test or have tested. Another work product, the second work products are your defects, the things you found that do not work according to your belief, to your experience, or to the specs. And then finally, you have your reports, a report on the work that you've done, a report on the quality of the product you have tested, a report that no one reads, or that hardly anyone reads, or at least that no one respects, because they have other stuff to do. They get so many reports. You should wonder, is all of that, those test cases, those defects, those reports, Are they useful on itself as standalone products, or are they useful to the end customer? And the response is no. When I buy tomorrow a brand new smartphone, I do not want to receive a list of test cases that somebody in the QA department did, or of the defects that were resolved, or a report on all the tests that were run. I just want a guarantee that it will work as I expect. So to summarize, we are creating work products that for the end customer, they deliver no value at all. And strangely enough, that is also how we start to measure or continue to measure testing. We typically have those large reports and dashboards to please our stakeholders, to please our project and whatever manager you can think of. And they are filled with data and statistics and information. How many test cases have you written? How many test cases have you executed? How many test cases were passed compared to how many test cases were failed? Which percentage of the risks was covered by test cases or by past test cases? Which percentage of the requirements was covered by test cases or by past test cases? How many defects have we found? How many major defects or minor defects or medium defects were found? How many test cases were found per week or executed per week? How many defects were opened and then reopened again? What was your defect density? All kind of data that we put into report to give us an idea, a perceived idea on the quality of the product that we are testing. Now, all of these measurements, all the data, they are an attempt from us to quantify the quality of the product we're trying to test. And by doing that, we try to model the reality, the product itself and its quality, by building and constructing a view on the quality of that model. The problem with that is that with every view you create, including the view on the quality, that view is subjective. Because in order to compose that view, you're going to abandon certain other aspects. Because in reality, all data is too complex. And every view makes sure you lose your overview. It's very one-sided. We are trying with our models, trying to give people information to make decisions about the quality, but what we're actually trying to do is trying to push a square peg into a round hole. And an image has more than 1,000 words, so as this artist has shown, depending on your perspective, what normal people see is a lion, but the giraffe here sees a dick, depending on the perspective. And people are now looking at me like I shouldn't have put that on a slide, so apologies for that for those who might be offended. Let's go back to the people who actually do the testing. And let me introduce you my favorite tester of all times, called Timmy the Tester. Timmy the Tester has worked for us for quite some while, has done a tremendous amount of job, tests very thoroughly, knows what he or she is doing, what he's doing, and has over the last couple of weeks executed more than 1,000 test cases in only 10 man days, so 2 weeks of testing. And in his test cases, and with some exploratory tests also going on, found 300 something defects, of which 107 are critical. I love Timmy, everybody loves Timmy, does a great job, is always willing to do some work. Next to Timmy, we also have Tanya the Tester. Not related to each other, just their nicknames. Tanya the Tester has executed roughly 500 test cases in the same amount of man days. And she found in the same amount of time 26 defects, of which 8 are critical. Now again, remember the perspectives on quality. Your management always wants to know who of the two is now the better tester, who deserves a raise, who do we need to hire, who are going to assign to the best project, who is the best tester, who provides the best quality. Looking at statistics only, the quality that we perceive, you would say, I choose all the time for Timmy. Executed more test cases the same amount of time, found more defects and more critical defects. Now, when you add more information beyond the data, you will see that reality is often a bit distorted. Timmy, he executed were easy test cases, GUI test cases, input test cases, validation of fields. The majority of the defects that Timmy found were rather easy fixes, things which were really also cosmetic. Timmy also had a tendency to overestimate the criticality of the defects. A lot of defects he reported as critical were actually not that critical. Tanya, on the other hand, executed a lot of complex end-to-end test cases, so that takes quite a lot of time and setup. And on top of that, she also improved and corrected the test cases along the way. So instead of failing the test case because of an error in the test case itself, she corrected the test case, which also takes time. The defects Tanya found were really critical. And you might even say that the majors she found might also even be promoted to critical. And what Tanya also did was helping Timmy when he was stuck with some test cases. So there she, if you would call it like that, lost some time. And then the final activity of Tanya was sitting together with developers to try to reproduce the defects she found, because she wouldn't like to play defect ping pong, and also to investigate the root cause. So taking this into account, who is now the better tester? Is it a traditional Timmy, or is it a little bit more agile Tanya? Well, depending on the situation, both have their value. But again, it depends on the context. That is also what you see when you try to abandon your traditional testing and try to put some agility in your testing. What will you get when it comes down to value, which is rather intangible, and quality when you go more for collaborative testing, for more an agile approach in testing? You will see that instead of finding defects, you are avoiding defects. But you cannot measure the amount of defects you avoided by doing reviews, by sitting together, by clearing up miscommunications. You will also have better regression test cases and better test cases because you will have more eyes looking at the same thing. Because, for example, you could use pairing. You can end up with higher quality code. Again, less unclarities in your documentation. Testers also having a look at the code, seeing which is correctly documented, making sure you did a maintainability analysis of the code, less technical depth, including a higher quality of the documentation because of reviews, because you also assisted in writing the documentation. Not only a higher quality of documentation, but also the right amount of documentation. Not too little and not too much. Just the right amount of right amount of information at the right moment. You will have better collaboration. You will have faster defect resolvement. You have a decreased lead time. The lead time is the time from the start of the project when the idea was concepted until the go live. So faster delivery, which end up in happier customers and last but not least also a happier team. These can all be advantages of pouring some agility into your team. Does that mean that your now traditional team needs to migrate, transform completely to an agile team? No. Concepts of agility can be embedded in any form of team, in a hybrid team, in a hybrid way of working. Whether you call it Wedgile or Vegile or Water Scrum or whatever kind of fancy name you can come up with, every way that you continue to collaborate better can be a success. There is, however, one pitfall. This is an example of a kamikaze pilot. Well, if you continue to do this, you can be considered as tester a kamikaze pilot. Because all of these things you are now realizing are not being expressed in data. None of this can be expressed in a dashboard or in a Jira or in whatever kind of fancy report you can think of. So management can start to think that you as a tester become unneeded. Why would we still need testers? Or that any of your tasks, the repetitive tasks, the regression tasks, can be fully automated. And that's a sentence we hear more and more. We're replacing manual tests with automated tests. Well, nothing can replace the sapient, critical, analytical behavior of a tester. Now, enough with comparing old with new. Let's see how you now can evolve to a more qualitative agile approach. What is the plan of our evolutions as testers? Well, with the years that go by, with experience, with training, that can allow you to advance your skill sets in two different directions. You can advance your skill set in depth, which is on the vertical axis, and in breadth, which is the horizontal axis. In depth, that means that you deepen your skills. You learn more about a certain specific topic. You aim to become a specialist in your domain, the one that everyone consults for a certain topic. You are knowledgeable. You might be called a nerd or a professor, but you carry those names with a sense of pride. It's an ongoing, continuous quest for more and for better information. On your horizontal axis, we plot the breadth of knowledge, the skills, the experience we have. So the more you advance in that direction, the wider your knowledge on a set of topics becomes. You know something about almost everything. You have become a generalist, a handyman, a jack of all trades. Now, what you see now is the future. Those are the capabilities you have. That's the evolution that you can undergo as a tester. Until now, you are right there, a little gray or blue stain on this canvas, eager to spread out and evolve your career as a tester. At first, you are trying to seek wisdom, excellence, knowledge. You follow trainings, you attend courses, you take a look at seminars like this one. Whilst your knowledge goes more in depth, you become what is known as an I shape. You have almost no general knowledge, no breadth of knowledge. You are specialized in one thing and one thing only. That can be test design, can be exploratory testing, can be tooling, performance testing, security testing, test automation. Name it, one area of expertise, one niche of expertise. You realize then that you have to broaden your horizon. That's your second step. You check out what your colleagues are doing. You pair up with them. You take up a small cosmetic task which is normally not for you from the Scrum board. Maybe you open up an IDE and you try to read a few lines of code, to analyze a few lines of code. You might even understand some of these lines of code. Or you assist in writing documentation. You start manning the help desk for a couple of days to understand what customers are calling about. You are becoming what is known as a T shape. You still rely on your single specification, so your I in the T, for which you are admired, but you have broadened your knowledge with some generalization. The third step, lo and behold, it appears that some of these activities that you tried are quite appealing and you get a hang of it. And even more, you're actually becoming quite good at it. The developers are happy, for example, because you seem to be able not only to find and to detect defects, but also you have the knowledge and the admiration to open up the editor, to debug the codes, and even to apply and document the fix, and even to rebuild and deploy the code. Now everybody is happy. You have a fast fix so you can test further. The developers can focus back on what they're good at writing proper code. So everybody's happy. You have now evolved in what is called a pi shape. That is the Greek letter pi, not the mathematical number 3.14, also not a pie that you can eat. You have still your primary specification, testing, which is your domain of expertise. Now you have also a second specialization. You are becoming an oracle for your junior people that are seeking wisdom for you. And your last generation of evolution, it doesn't stop there because you are, as a tester, you are a restless soul. You're continuously seeking wisdom. You're looking for innovation. You want to reinvent yourself. It's continuous improvement. So you're seeking more areas to specialize yourself in, more areas to get familiar with. It might even be that you abandon some of the previous areas because you say, you know what, security testing maybe is not for me. And that's also fine. Maybe you're teaming up with the people from infrastructure to know more about IT design. Or you have been seen quarreling with a chief data protection officer to know something about GDPR and all that regulation. Maybe you're taking some management tasks off the back of your supervisor, which has too much meetings. Or you're making recommendations to improve the working of your team. Now you have become what is known as the comb shape. You have extensive generalization, so you know a lot about everything, but you also have multiple areas of specialization. But still, your quest isn't over yet. Like any comb, the more teeth you have, the neater the hair will be. So you keep on investing in yourself, until the moment has arrived that you are now officially declared the Superman or the Superwoman of the organization. And then when that happens, then it's time to retire. You're now 60, 70 years old, you're full of wisdom, and now you're completely exhausted, and it's time for something else. That's all neat and fine. Now, what are these areas of generalization and specialization that we're looking at? Well, I will share a couple of those with you, what we call Agile Quality 2.0. What are the hallmarks that will make you a quality ambassador in Agile? Well, the first one is what we call the Agile Quality mindset. That's not something you can learn in books. That's something you can only experience by doing. What do we consider an Agile Quality mindset? Realizing that delivering value, that is a collective responsibility of the team. That your goal is not to create test cases, but making sure that as a team we can deliver that value to our customers, because that's what generates the money that keeps the business flowing. That you should be able to trust the team, that if a developer tells you something, you can assume that he or she will do that. That if an analyst tells you he or she will do that, that it will actually happen. But also that you can be trusted. If you say you will test something, that you actually will test something. There's trust amongst your team members. That you're willing to share and to mentor. There will always be changes in your team, especially nowadays when the job market is so hot. People will recruit people you work with nowadays, so you have a constant flow of new people. That means you will have to share knowledge. Because we're documenting less at the right time, knowledge will be in the heads and the brains of people. So that means you will continuously have to adapt your processes to it. You embrace what is so called the whole team approach. That if a developer is in trouble, even you as a tester can assist. Vice versa, if you as a tester are in trouble, maybe the analyst or developer can test. We as a team are responsible for the product of our output. But also that you are the continuous lookout for improvements. By doing retrospectives, by doing lessons learned, by taking as an active step every retrospective one action on your Scrum board, on your Kanban board as an improvement, either to the people, that can be as simple, we organize one breakfast per week for the entire team, an improvement for the process, how can we make our process more efficient or more effective, but also to the product that we're creating, what makes it a better product, what can be a nifty new thing that will convince customers to pay X amount of money to buy our product. And then finally, the ability and the dare to experiment, to try new things. Try the new tool, try a new approach, try a new technique. Try to pair with people. Do not be afraid, especially if you work in a quality-driven organization from an agile mindset. Your iteration length will not exceed 2 or 3 weeks. So the only thing you can lose is 15, 10, 5 days of time. Compared to the total budget of your project, that's nothing. So dare to experiment with that. These are your first hallmark, the agile quality mindset. The second one is the concept of faster delivery, trying to deliver value faster to your customers. That means that you want your practices to be so efficient and effective as possible. In manufacturing, you could call it lean, that you make sure all the obstacles are out of the way. What are we doing now that is not delivering value? Those are the things we're going to delete from our processes and our practices. You are complaining you have too many meetings. Make a list which meetings are essentially or crucial and which not. Those where you're only informed or consultant, skip those. Easy wins. You also maximize the work not done. That is contrary to how a lot of organizations are working. You have backlogs full of work there and we want everything done. No. You better focus on one thing and do it 100% than doing 20 things for 80%. Maximize the work that you will not do and make sure the work that you did do, you're proud of and will generate value. You embrace the pull mechanism versus the push mechanism. Push means a boss telling you, do this, do that. These are the tasks that needs to be done by next week. That's a developer telling you, this user story is ready, this requirement is ready, this code is ready, test it. The pull mechanism, which is far more effective, means you tell people, I have availability. what is ready, what can I do, and you take that one. That makes sure you have a constant flow of activity in the organization. Even though if the task is maybe not designed completely for you, then again, you optimize the capacity of your team. You also understand the delivery pipeline, continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous testing. What does that mean? Do I mean with that you need to be an expert in automation and tooling? No, not at all. But at least that you know what are the necessary steps as a jumping board to a DevOps approach. You also understand that customer issues have the highest priority. Nobody likes to be interrupted, and we all know that there's a concept of context switching where you lose valuable time because you change priorities. But if the customer who is paying you demands something, that has a higher priority than anything else, which is not synonym for we drop all the work and we switch to the customer. No, but it just means that on your backlog, whether it is the iteration backlog or the product backlog, those customer issues are rated at a high priority. And then finally, you make sure you set up a decent quality strategy. Whether you call this a test strategy, quality strategy, whether you use the test pyramids, the test quadrants, any other thing you could think of, make sure you have the strategy ready, because your iteration length is so limited, you do not have time to think about what strategy to apply within your iteration. So that iteration should be the implementation of that strategy. The third hallmark is trying to build quality in using engineering principles. That means that you are continuously reviewing and assessing the quality of the assets of the team. Are we doing the right things right now? If not, we abandon and we make another way possible to do it. I explained it before. We make sure that we have just enough, not too much, and just-in-time documentation. I do not want my user stories be ready 3 weeks before I start testing or developing them, because things will change. I do not want extensive papers of 20 pages about how something should work if you can explain it to me in 4 examples. Limit the documentation until the level which is needed. And you can be sure that is context dependent. If you work for a small organization, small startup, the number of documentation will be limited. If you're working for an organization like a bank, an insurance institution, federal government, something in aviation, there the amount of documentation required will be higher. It depends on the context, of course. Use pairing principles, not only in development but also in testing. Put a junior tester next to a more experienced tester to increase their effectiveness and efficiency. Make sure you use techniques to estimate. Can be something stupid that everybody already knows, like planning poker, or use t-shirt sizing, or use silent estimations, or wideband Delphi, or TPA, or whatever technique possible. But just do not use gut feeling. Do not say, well, developers said it takes 10 days, so I say it takes 20 days. That's rubbish. Leads to nothing. Just leads to uncredible estimations and techniques. Make sure you have your business priorities straight. What are they? What is actually gaining revenue for my company? What is my minimal viable product? What is my minimal marketable product? What do I want to reach? Make sure you demo frequently, that your customer can give feedback all of the time, every week, every 2 weeks. Maybe something is not what the customer expects. That's something you want to hear as soon as possible. Even if you progress slower than the customer would expect, it's nice that the customer knows it beforehand. That it's not a black box that the customer is in anticipation for 6 months. Then all of a sudden you have to say, you know what, dear customer, we're going to release 3 months later. Delays should never come as a surprise to your end customer. And finally, from a technical point of view, use refactoring to prevent technical debt. Technical debt is something you want to avoid for future releases. Again, if you know upfront that you are creating a throwaway product that in 6 months' time will not exist anymore, that's fine. The technical debt is not your primary concern. But if you work on a product that has a longer lifespan, technical debt is a big enemy. Not only for the code of the product, but also consider the technical depth of your test automation cases. And then finally, we come to the hallmarks which are specific for testing. What are these? Making sure that quality as an aspect is embedded in your definition of ready and your definition of done. Definition of ready, when can our developers start development? So make sure you have great quality gates there. Definition of done, when is something ready to be demoed or to be put into production? There, as a tester, you have a great saying in how quality can be determined. You also can determine the completion criteria for each product backlog item, for each user story, for each change request, for each defect. When do we consider as testers, when do you consider as tester, this product backlog item complete enough to be put into production? You can help in determining a test strategy, whether you use the pyramids or the quadrants or whatever you can think of. How are we generically within our team for this product testing products? Are we going to follow the more standard approach of first writing test cases, then executing? Are we going to explore? Are we going to do mob testing? Are we doing canary tests? Are we using tissue testers? What is our test strategy? Where do we want to go? Aligned with the vision and the marketing plans of the organization. Making sure that for every user story, for every requirement, you have the right test approach. Are we testing in a systematic approach, using test cases, or exploratory, which is, of course, derived from the test strategy but implemented on a user story level? Decide also on how much regression testing is valuable. We know that in Agile, regression testing becomes the cornerstone because every iteration you are changing things that might have an influence on the deliveries previously done. But maybe it's not valuable to invest every time either automation resources or manual resources in executing everything. So, an impact matrix on which modules of the software impact which can be handy. Put a big board on the wall with all the functions or all the modules, all the classes, all the components. Put some red wires between them, like on a product increment board, and make sure you know what the dependencies are. Will help you to focalize better your regression testing. If you can, if you have the opportunity, make sure you can try some TDD, ATDD, BDD concepts. Not from a testing point of view, because that's how I see it being used most often. We use ATDD and BDD from a test automation point of view, but rather from a defect prevention point of view. From the TDD side to create better code, from the BDD and the ATDD side to make sure you have better documentation, because that's the primary thing you want to create, a primary work product you're creating with BDD and ATDD, not the test cases. These are the things to check the code, not what customer wants. And then finally, make sure you try to optimize your test activities. Continuously question yourself, are we doing the right thing as effective and as efficient as possible? That, in a nutshell, sums up what I wanted to share with you. So I would like to thank you for attention. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send them via mail or any way out of possible. And I hope to see you soon at a future conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for your insightful presentation, Michael Pilaeten. We look forward to having you at our next conference. You can be sure to tune into our channels A4Q, ISQI, and GASQ on Facebook and YouTube. And the stream will be available on Skills Club as well as the presentations afterwards. Thank you so much and enjoy your evening.